Hello, I'm Josie, and at 33, I've spent more time with cameras than with people. Growing up in a family that owned a series of hotels and restaurants, you might expect me to continue with the family legacy. However, I chose a different path. I swapped the comforts of the family business for the unpredictability of a camera and the natural world as my backdrop. Freelance photography became my calling, capturing images for magazines and advertisements, driven by those who appreciated my unique perspective. My photography journey turned pivotal when my old, trusted camera, my companion on countless assignments, finally broke down. Instead of seeking a quick online replacement, I decided to visit a local tech store, wanting to get a feel for a new camera before making a decision. That day in the store felt routine until it didn't. As I was perusing the camera aisle, a guy around my age approached me. His demeanor was relaxed, and he lacked the aggressive pitch of a typical salesperson. Looking for something specific, he asked. I half-jokingly responded, yeah, something that won't quit on me mid-shot. He chuckled in understanding. We started talking about what I usually shoot, mostly nature scenes, but sometimes urban landscapes to keep things interesting. His name was Thomas. He guided me through the latest models, describing the specifications with the enthusiasm of someone reciting their favorite prose. Refreshingly, he never pushed the most expensive options on me. Eventually, he pointed out a sleek model that seemed just right. Willing to take this one for a spin, he suggested. Deciding felt surprisingly easy, and soon, Thomas was finalizing my purchase. As he handed me the bag, he casually asked for my number, just to make sure everything's working great. I saw through his subtle ploy but played along, joking that any spam text would cost him a coffee. True to his word, Thomas did call, but not about the camera. Instead, he asked me out. I accepted, thinking why not? Life is short after all. From our first meeting at the camera store to countless adventures thereafter, Thomas and I became inseparable. We shared many moments, him with his quirky tech knowledge, and me capturing the city through my lens. About 8 months later, Thomas excitedly proposed a weekend getaway. Despite my teasing threat of a survival camp leading to him sleeping on the couch, I eagerly packed. He picked me up in his beloved but rickety old Jeep, and we drove off, the playlist setting the mood as we both got lost in anticipation. He had booked us a quaint cabin by a lake, not fancy, but perfect for us. That night, as we sat by the fire roasting marshmallows, the simplicity of the setting perfect for golden brown treats, I could sense he had something important to say. Thomas fumbled with his words, a stick poking at the fire, trying to articulate his feelings. As I sat by the crackling campfire, munching on a marshmallow, Thomas got a thoughtful look in his eyes. I've been thinking a lot, he said, causing me to raise an eyebrow in mock alarm. Thinking can be dangerous, you know, I teased. Thomas chuckled, took a deep breath, and turned to face me, the firelight casting shadows across his features. I love this, you know, us. And I'm hoping you feel the same way, he confessed, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Leaning in, I nudged his shoulder lightly. Yeah, I kinda do, I admitted with a smile. Suddenly, Thomas fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening. He went silent, looking both serious and slightly terrified. Marry me, Josie. For real, he blurted out as he opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. It was so unexpected that I burst out laughing. It was either that or burst into tears. Thomas, this is possibly the worst proposal ever. Of course, I will, I replied, still laughing. Relief washed over him, and he grinned. Damn, I thought I'd need to convince you more, he said. Just promise me no more surprises like this without a warning, I teased. No promises, he replied playfully, slipping the ring onto my finger. We spent the rest of the evening just sitting by the dying fire, talking about what this step meant for us. No grand dreams, just real stuff like whether we should get a new couch or if his Jeep could survive another winter. The next day was spent lazily by the lake, skipping stones and discussing how to break the news to our families. Thomas was a bit estranged from his folks, who were always focused on money and prestige. He warned me that they might not take well to me, not seeing me as worthy in their eyes. Let them talk, I said, tossing a stone across the water. We know what we have, and that's enough. Thomas nodded, watching the ripples. Yeah, it's us against the world, huh? Always, I confirmed, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but feeling it would definitely be worth it. Little did I know just how challenging things would get with his family. A few weeks later, when it was time to meet Thomas's infamous in-laws, we drove to their house on a Sunday. I was a bundle of nerves, fussing over my appearance, eager to make a good impression. The moment we stepped through the door, it was like walking into a chill. Thomas's mom scrutinized me as if inspecting something unsavory, and his dad wasn't much warmer, giving us a skeptical look. So, Josie, was it? His mom began, without even a smile. Who do you work for? What's your salary like? Her blunt questions caught me off guard. I'm a freelance photographer, I explained. I work for myself, so my income varies. At that, Thomas's sister, who had been idly scrolling on her phone, looked up and snorted. Freelance? That sounds like a fancy word for being jobless. Thomas could have picked anyone, and he ends up with a beggar from an alley? Their laughter stung, and I felt a flush of embarrassment heat my cheeks. Thomas's hand found mine, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Hey, that's enough, he snapped, his voice more forceful than I'd ever heard it. I love her, and she's brilliant at what she does. That's all you need to know. His mom rolled her eyes but dropped the subject. Dinner was a tense affair, with me attempting to make polite conversation while dodging snide remarks about my little hobby. It was a relief to finally say our goodbyes after that disaster. It was then my turn to introduce Thomas to my parents. We met them at a cozy little cafe downtown, a stark contrast to the tension at his family's place. My parents were all smiles, welcoming Thomas with open arms, ready to embrace him into our family without hesitation. When we walked into the cafe, my parents immediately wrapped us in warm hugs. Thomas, we've heard so much about you, my mom exclaimed, guiding him to a table by the window. My dad, his eyes twinkling, joined in with a hearty handshake. We're just ordinary pensioners now, he said modestly. Used to run a little shop back in the day, nothing too grand, he added, winking at me. A silent promise to keep our family's financial success our little secret for now. Thomas, looking visibly more relaxed than he had in days, was encouraged by my mom to share his story. Josie's told us bits and pieces, but we'd love to hear more from you, she said warmly. As he opened up about his battles with his family's high expectations and his aspirations to start his own tech company, my parents listened attentively, interjecting with thoughtful questions. Over coffee, I realized how starkly different this meeting was from the chilly reception at his family's house. Here, there was no judgment or intrusive probing into our finances, just sincere interest and acceptance. It felt like a soothing balm after the earlier unpleasantness. As we left the cafe, Thomas squeezed my hand. Your folks are amazing, Josie. Thanks for that, I needed it, he said gratefully. I smiled, feeling heartened by his words and my parents' easy acceptance. They love you already, you know, I reassured him. Thomas and I envisioned a simple wedding. Nothing grand, just close friends, a little chapel, and good food. But predictably, his family had other ideas. His sister scoffed at our plans during a family dinner, jeering, a modest wedding? More like a beggar's bash, and provoked laughter from everyone except Thomas. His mother chimed in with a snide remark about how it seemed we couldn't afford anything better. Trying to maintain my composure, I explained, it's our wedding. We want it to be intimate and personal. Thomas supported me firmly. Josie's right. It's our day, our way. The wedding day itself was everything we had hoped for, simple, meaningful, and beautiful. However, true to form, Thomas's mom and sister barely concealed their disdain, sitting aloof and sour-faced, not mingling with my family and responding to friendly overtures with cold stares. After the ceremony, when Thomas and I moved into my apartment, the real challenges began. His mom and sister started dropping by unannounced, often around mealtime. They'd sit at my table, eating the food I'd prepared while making snide remarks. So, Josie, still snapping pictures for pennies, his sister would ask with a smirk. I kept my response light yet firm, Photography can be quite lucrative, you know. They would exchange skeptical looks, clearly not convinced. One afternoon, while supposedly job hunting, his sister bluntly asked, "Come on, how much do you make?" Before I could respond, Thomas intervened, his voice tight with irritation. "That's none of your business. Josie isn't living off me. We're partners." Despite this, their visits became more frequent, and his sister's requests more audacious. She would blatantly ask Thomas to transfer money so she could go out with her friends, loud enough for me to overhear. Sometimes Thomas would relent and send her money. Other times, he'd refuse, standing firm against her intrusions. After yet another of her tantrums about money, Ashley stormed out of our apartment. Once the door slammed shut, I turned to Thomas with a serious look. "We need to set some boundaries. This can't go on," I said firmly. Thomas sighed deeply, rubbing his temples in frustration. "I know, Josie. I'm sorry. It's just family stuff is hard, you know?" Tensions between Thomas and his family had been escalating for a while, and everything came to a head during a Sunday dinner at his mother's house. It was Ashley's birthday dinner in a couple of months, and she had already set her heart on a lavish gift. As soon as we walked through the door, she wasted no time diving into her wish list. "Thomas, you know what I want for my birthday, right? That designer bag I showed you last week. It's just over $1,000. Thomas frowned, his jaw clenching in that way that signaled he was about to assert himself. "Ashley, we've talked about this. I can't be dropping that kind of money anymore. I'm married now, and we have our expenses." Ashley's face contorted as if she had bitten into a sour lemon. "Oh, come on, Thomas. Since when do you back down from spoiling your little sis? What? Has Josie got you on a leash now?" The room fell silent, the tension palpable. You could have heard a pin drop. I felt every eye on me, especially the burning glare from his mother. Thomas shook his head and reached over to squeeze my hand under the table for support. "No, Ashley, I'm sorry, but we've made a budget and we're sticking to it." That set Ashley off. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back with a loud scrape that made me jump. "This is all your fault," she shrieked at me. "You're just sucking him dry, taking all his money and attention. He used to have enough for me before you." I tried to maintain a calm tone. "Ashley, I haven't asked Thomas to stop helping you. We're just being responsible." That's when his mom chimed in, siding with Ashley as always. "Thomas, she's your sister. You can't let her down. What kind of brother are you if you can't help her out?" Thomas had enough. He stood up, pulling me up with him. "Enough. We're leaving. I'm not going to justify our personal decisions here." We left amidst Ashley's cries and his mom's accusing eyes. It was the last straw. We decided then and there to cut off communication for a while. We needed peace, a break from the drama. So, we packed up a few days later and went on a small trip, just the two of us, to clear our heads. Returning from that trip felt like a breath of fresh air. However, we soon discovered that Ashley hadn't given up. She broke into our apartment while we were still unloading our car. "You think you can just go off on vacations with my brother's money while I get nothing?" Ashley was in my face the second I walked in, her voice so loud it echoed off the walls. "What are you talking about, Ashley?" "I use my own money for our trips," I said, struggling to keep my composure. But seeing her rifling through my closet, throwing my clothes around, made my blood boil. "Lies." All this, she waved dismissively at my belongings scattered on the floor, bought with Thomas's money, right? Living the high life while I get scraps. Before I could intervene, she grabbed my new camera from the desk and hurled it to the floor. The crash felt like a physical blow. "That's enough," I screamed, my patience snapping. "Get out of our apartment now." When Thomas came back and saw the mess and the broken camera, he was furious. He immediately called Ashley, his voice filled with anger, demanding she stay away and respect our boundaries. Amidst the chaos of trying to salvage what was left of my equipment, she abruptly ended her call, lobbing sharp insults before disconnecting. Thomas turned to me, his demeanor softening. "I'm terribly sorry, Josie. I'll make sure you get a new camera. We'll resolve this, don't worry." His reassurance barely registered as I nodded, my emotions too stirred to form words. Together, we began to clean up, enveloped in a heavy silence that bore the weight of our mutual resolve not to let his family's antics tear us apart again. Weeks later, after the incident with the camera, Thomas received a surprisingly cheerful call from his sister Ashley. She was excited to announce her birthday and, unexpectedly, her engagement. They were planning a celebration at Regal Terrace, the city's most prestigious restaurant. Normally, the mere mention of such a pretentious place would make me scoff, but this time, I found myself smiling at the news. Thomas noticed and looked confused. "I thought you'd want to avoid anything to do with Ashley after the mess," he remarked, a hint of hesitation in his voice. Leaning closer, I whispered, "Trust me, this is one event we shouldn't miss. There's a reason for it." He studied my expression for a moment before nodding in agreement. "Okay, if you think it's best." On the evening of the dinner, we dressed in our finest, Thomas in a dashing suit and myself in a chic, black dress. As we approached the reserved area, I could see the entire family assembled around a large table, including Thomas's parents and Ashley's new fiancé, a man with a smirk that seemed too practiced. Ashley waved us over, her grin wide, but not quite reaching her eyes. "Look who's here. Join us to celebrate my big day." As we drew closer, it became apparent that there was one chair too few. Ashley's eyes glinted with mischief as she observed our approach. Thomas's mother quickly noted our pause and said snidely, "It looks like we're short one chair. This table is for family. And Josie, you might as well stand or find a spot at the bar," Ashley added, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. The relatives murmured among themselves, some smirking, others shifting awkwardly. Thomas, visibly angry and clenching his fists, turned to me. "We should leave. We don't need this." However, I gently stopped him. "No, let's stay. It's important." Confused but trusting, he stayed by my side. As the tension mounted, the restaurant manager approached us, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, but it's a full house tonight. I can't offer you an extra chair at the moment," he explained, his eyes flicking between the smug faces at the table and us. Just as Ashley and her mother's grins widened, thinking they had bested us, the manager's tone changed as he addressed me. "However, we do have a special VIP table reserved for the daughter of the owner of Regal Terrace. Miss Josie, your table is ready." The table fell utterly silent, forks suspended in the air, as shock washed over Ashley and her mother's faces. Thomas turned to me in disbelief. "Your dad owns this place?" I nodded with a slight smile. "I wanted you to know me for who I am, not because of my connections," I admitted, gesturing around the luxurious setting. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're full of surprises. Good thing you didn't tell me sooner, or I'd be swamped with favors to ask." We both chuckled, the earlier tension dissolving as we followed the manager to our secluded VIP table with a spectacular view over the city. The murmurs from Thomas's family turned to whispers of astonishment, their previous confidence replaced by a stunned silence. Just as we had settled into the luxurious comfort of our secluded VIP table, enjoying the enhanced flavor of champagne, about 20 minutes later, a contrite Ashley and her equally remorseful mother approached us. Their earlier confidence had melted away, replaced by visible discomfort. "Josie, we didn't quite anticipate this, but we went a bit overboard with our orders," Ashley stuttered, avoiding my gaze. "The bill is more than we expected. Could you, since your family—" I raised an eyebrow, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Oh, but I thought you mentioned earlier that I wasn't family," I reminded her calmly, ensuring my point was felt. Her mother joined in, her voice tinged with desperation. "Josie, please, we just didn't know. Help us out here." Thomas squeezed my hand under the table, a silent gesture of support. I surveyed their anxious expressions and then glanced at Thomas, who gave a subtle nod. "I think it's best if you handle your own bill tonight," I responded firmly. "After all, it's important to live within one's means. Wouldn't you agree?" Ashley's face dropped, and her mother's expression tightened. They turned and walked away, heading back to their table to face the consequences of their extravagance. After our encounter at Regal Terrace, life settled into a new rhythm for Thomas and me. His family, previously sharp and distant, abruptly changed their tune, showering us with compliments and invitations as if they had always adored me. It felt like watching bad actors in a poorly scripted play. We chose to keep our distance, preferring the peace of our little world. Things became even more interesting when we learned through the grapevine that Ashley's fiancé had broken off their engagement shortly after the dinner debacle. "Can't tie myself to that kind of drama," he reportedly said. I couldn't blame him. Thomas and I were enjoying a perfect afternoon at my parents' house, lounging on the terrace with the city spread peacefully below, sipping tea as the sunset painted the sky. "They're trying, huh?" Thomas noted, nodding towards his phone, which had been buzzing with texts from his mom. I chuckled, rolling my eyes. "Trying too hard. It's almost embarrassing. But I'm more interested in what's happening with you and my dad." Thomas's face brightened, a familiar spark igniting as he discussed his passions. "Your dad's incredible, you know?" He offered to fund my startup. He's been looking for a new venture and thinks my tech idea has potential. My mom, joining us with a fresh pot of tea, smiled knowingly. "We've always believed in supporting dreams, and we believe in you, Thomas." He reached over, squeezing her hand gratefully. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." The conversation then shifted to future plans, dreams of a tech company that could change our small corner of the world, and eventually to the family Thomas and I hope to start soon. "Do you think you're ready for the whole parenting adventure?" my dad asked, a twinkle in his eye. Thomas laughed, a sound rich with warmth and anticipation. "With Josie, I'd be ready for anything." And so, our days were filled with planning and dreaming. Thomas began laying the groundwork for his business, fueled by my dad's support and the freedom of no longer hiding who we were. As for me, I relished the unfolding of our new life together, full of promise and newfound alliances. As I continued to explore the world through my camera lens, I began to envision a future that might soon include a little one tugging at my skirt, eager to see the world as mommy sees it. One serene evening, while Thomas and I relaxed on our couch with the city lights flickering like distant promises outside our window, I decided to address the thoughts swirling in my mind. "Thomas, do you ever think about how wild it is, the way everything turned out?" I asked, tucking my feet under his legs for warmth. He chuckled softly, pulling me closer, his arms a comforting presence. "Every day, but I wouldn't change a thing." "Not really. Not even your sister's drama," I teased, nudging him playfully. "Well, maybe that," he admitted with a grin. "But it all led us to this moment, right?" We spent the remainder of the evening sharing our dreams and ideas aloud, talking about potential nursery themes and the kind of parents we hope to become. It all felt incredibly real, a future that was uniquely ours, just starting to take shape. As we eventually made our way to bed, the last thing I saw was the ring on my finger, glinting softly in the low light, a solid symbol of our shared experiences and the future we were stepping into together. As I drifted into sleep, a thought crossed my mind. This is the essence of true happiness.
Since they will be staying here, could you please move out today? We'll also pay the $473 monthly loan. Now that my daughter is coming, we no longer need you, okay? My mother-in-law said, her voice firm. Well then, please take care of everything from now on, I responded, trying to mask my hurt with a calm tone. Even though we had supported our in-laws so much, they easily shifted their trust to the younger sister. As I reached the entrance, packing my belongings, I decided it was time to say something important. "Oh, by the way, it seems there's a misunderstanding about the monthly loan repayment," I said, looking directly at my mother-in-law. Their faces turned pale in shock. "My name is Zoe, a 35-year-old office worker. I've been married to Levi for 3 years. We met through a mutual friend who believed we'd be perfect for each other. This friend's intuition was spot on. We were drawn to each other from our first conversation. Levi also felt the same and we began dating. We continued the relationship smoothly, and around 2 years later he proposed to me. I was so happy because I loved him so much. Both our families agreed to our marriage and we had a wonderful wedding attended by many. We then went on a honeymoon and began our life together as a married couple. We both worked, so we shared household chores. Levi had lived alone for a long time and could cook, which was a huge help. Even when I was late from work, Levi helped me and started cooking so we could have dinner soon after. We cooperated in all household tasks, and life felt peaceful and stress-free. We were grateful for each other's company. In the blink of an eye, 3 years passed, and our bond remained as strong as when we were newlyweds. However, a significant event occurred. Levi's father fell ill suddenly, and we rushed to the hospital. "Dad, are you okay?" Levi asked, worry etched on his face. Levi, Zoe, thank you for coming. Sorry for causing you concern. It seems I overexerted myself," his father replied, looking weary but managing a small smile. He had been a workaholic, often working long hours, and as he aged, the stress of those years took a toll on him. "For now, I'll undergo some tests and wait for the results," he added, trying to sound optimistic. "I see," Levi said, his anxiety not fully masked. "We were anxious, but more than that, my mother-in-law was quite upset." For the mother-in-law who had always supported her husband as a housewife, it was understandable that she was upset when her partner, the mainstay of the family, was suddenly in mortal danger. "Mother-in-law, are you all right?" I asked gently. "Yes, somehow," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. We cared deeply for both of them and began visiting them more frequently, trying to be as supportive as possible. After a week, the father-in-law's test results came out. Although he was released from the hospital, there were concerns about a recurrence. Realizing that they might not handle another emergency, Levi proposed something. "Hey, what if we live together with my parents?" Levi suggested, his tone hopeful. The proposal was expected. If my parents were in the same situation, I'd want to live with them too. "Of course I'm okay with that. Let's discuss it with them right away," I said, giving him a reassuring smile. "Thank you, Zoe," Levi replied, relief evident in his eyes. We quickly presented the idea to our in-laws. "Live together? We don't want to be a burden," said my mother-in-law, wiping away her tears. "Not a bother at all. Zoe and I are worried about both of you," I reassured them. "Thank you, both of you," my father-in-law said, his voice thick with emotion. Our in-laws, teary-eyed, gratefully accepted. They must have been quite anxious. We promptly moved in with them. My mother-in-law, knowing that both of us worked, took the lead in the household chores. Thanks to her, we could focus on our jobs. The father-in-law retired early and spent his days resting at home, which improved his health. We all got along wonderfully without any issues, and life was joyous. However, our in-laws made a certain proposal. "I've been thinking about this for a while. How would you feel about building a new 2-family house?" my father-in-law said one evening. "Huh?" I responded, caught off guard. "It's a bit small for 4 adults to live in this house, and if you have children in the future, it'll be even smaller. Considering the future, I've been thinking of building a bigger house where we can live comfortably for the rest of our lives. However, it's not something we can afford with just my savings. We will need to discuss and decide together," he explained. I glanced at Levi, who nodded in agreement. "Let's discuss this thoroughly and make the best decision for everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady amidst the sudden turn of events. Levi and I were surprised by the proposal, but we thought it wasn't a bad idea. While the current in-laws' house isn't too small, it's not particularly spacious or comfortable either. Living here long-term might lead to stress building up between us. Perhaps buying a new house where everyone can live comfortably is a good idea. After discussing with Levi for a while, we decided to go along with my father-in-law's proposal. "Let's do it," Levi said. "We should look for something that meets all our needs." "Absolutely," I agreed. "We need a place that's barrier-free for your parents and has plenty of rooms for future kids," I added. So the 4 of us went to real estate agencies to look at various properties. We considered making it barrier-free for our in-laws and ensuring there are plenty of rooms if children come along. Ideally, it should be in a safe area, close to both a hospital and a train station, and have easy access to grocery stores. Given everyone's requirements, it seemed like it might be pricey. However, if we are going to live here for the rest of our lives, compromises must be made. Each family member shared the same sentiment, so fueled by determination, We decided to build our dream house no matter the cost. After some time, our new home was finally completed. The exterior and interior were both new and beautiful, and just gazing upon it filled our hearts with joy. This is really amazing. I don't want to be sick anymore. I want to stay healthy and live here for as long as possible, my mother-in-law said, smiling broadly. I'm so glad you're happy with it, I replied, feeling a sense of accomplishment. This is the house that will be with us for our entire lives. When we have kids, I want to play catch in the garden and have barbecues, I exclaimed, excitement bubbling in my voice. That sounds great. Let's make lots of family memories here, Levi added, his eyes shining with joy. Living in the house turned out to be truly comfortable, and it felt like the pinnacle of happiness. Being in a comfortable home made me even more enthusiastic about my work. Subsequently, my work went very smoothly. Both my public and private lives were fulfilling, and I genuinely felt grateful for buying this house. The months passed in the blink of an eye, and 2 years had passed in this house. We continued to have a good relationship with our in-laws as always, and we believed that the days ahead would be filled with happiness. However, just when we thought this place would be our home for life, something unexpected happened. It was when my sister-in-law and her husband visited our new house. Wow, this really is a nice house. It's not fair that only you guys get to live here, she said, her tone laced with jealousy. What are you talking about? We discussed and decided to buy this house with our parents, I replied, trying to keep my cool. But I can't help but feel envious. While we're still living in a cheap rental, it feels like you're living beyond your means, she retorted, her words stinging. We've been paying the mortgage for this house, and it's quite a hefty amount every month. We're living within our means, earning enough to pay for this house, so there's no reason for her to complain, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. If we were to live here with the in-laws, it would be so much fun, don't you think? She continued, ignoring my response. What can you even know about the market for this house? Levi asked, clearly irritated. My husband and I exchanged a glance. The sister-in-law probably just blurted out without giving it much thought. However, her careless words started to move my in-laws' hearts. It would be lovely if Quinn could move and live here together, my father-in-law said, looking thoughtful. Yes, it would liven things up, my mother-in-law added, her eyes lighting up at the idea. Hey, what are you two talking about? Haven't we been living together all this while? I said, trying to lighten the atmosphere. Oh, come on, I was just saying, the sister-in-law replied, waving her hand dismissively. Exactly, there's no need to panic, right? Ha ha, my husband added, attempting to diffuse the tension. While the in-laws tried to brush it off, it was evident that they were enticed by the idea of living with the sister-in-law. They seemed to have a particular affection for her. Even Nala, their pet, went for her. She was a beauty with delicate features, looking like a doll since her childhood. 4 years younger than Levi, she was born when the in-laws were older, making them dot on her even more. This pampering had led her to become quite spoiled, and Levi had to deal with her demanding nature. Having heard all this from Levi, I was always wary of my sister-in-law for a while. The unexpected appearance of a sister-in-law took us both by surprise. When Levi and I were married, his sister didn't seem to give us any trouble. However, recently she had been increasingly eyeing our new house. One day my sister-in-law greeted me as I walked in. Oh, Zoe, you're back then. I'll be leaving now, she said. Huh, I wish you'd stay a bit longer, I replied, trying to be polite but secretly hoping she would leave. But Levi and you might find it inconvenient, she said, pretending to be considerate. I don't think it's a nuisance, I said, trying to hide my irritation. You might say that, but it's evident in your eyes and behavior, she retorted sharply. As she walked out, she called out, Unwanted guests should leave quickly. See you, Mom and Dad. When my sister-in-law left, my in-laws looked visibly upset, clearly wishing she had stayed longer, even though they didn't say it aloud. Their faces and attitudes spoke volumes. I often felt out of place, retreating to my room after work to avoid the growing tension in our home. When Levi came home, we'd cautiously make our way to the living room for dinner. The atmosphere around the dinner table became increasingly strained, with long silences hanging in the air. Levi sensed the change too, and began to suspect that his sister was the cause of our troubles. As our relationship with the in-laws deteriorated, the sister-in-law finally made her move. One holiday, Levi and I returned from our morning shopping to find unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. We exchanged perplexed glances, and his mother approached us from the living room. "You're finally back. We need to talk," she said, her tone unusually stern. As we entered the living room, there sat my sister-in-law and her husband. "Ah, you're finally here," she said casually. "Quinn, what's going on?" Levi asked, confusion evident in his voice. "From today we'll be living here, so please leave," she declared, catching us off guard. "What?" Levi and I were taken aback by her sudden announcement. "What is she thinking moving in today? Hold on, it's ridiculous to say that all of a sudden," I uttered a perplexed expression. "It's not sudden. We've discussed this with Mom and Dad for a long time," she responded confidently. "My parents and I will take care of everything ourselves. I can handle the household chores and even look after them when I need to. Please rely on us, Mom and Dad," Quinn continued. "With our daughter here, we don't need you anymore. A daughter-in-law who doesn't do housework or have children is no match for me," my mother-in-law stated. I was deeply hurt by her words. Seeing my shocked face, the sister-in-law smirked. "We'll pay the $473 monthly loan, okay?" the mother-in-law said, as if it would make everything all right. "Huh? $473? I stammered, unable to believe what I was hearing. "It's a great deal to live in such a nice house for that," she added. Levi and I exchanged dumbfounded glances. It became clear that the in-laws were already planning to kick us out. After such treatment, we couldn't continue living there. "Is that so?" I managed to say. "But we can't move out immediately. Could you give us at least a week? We need to find a new place," Levi continued. "Fine," his mother said, her tone indifferent. I looked at my mother-in-law and said indignantly, "You must be looking forward to living with Quinn and her husband from today." My mother-in-law looked disappointed, although my sister-in-law and her husband were very happy that we had decided to leave. "Calm down, Mom and Dad. The house isn't going anywhere. I'm looking forward to a week from now," she chimed in, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Although my in-laws and sister-in-law's family happily agreed to evict us, Levi and I seriously considered living together with such people. We quickly arranged to view rental properties and moved out within a week. On the day of our departure, they made it clear to us, "Please take care of everything from now on. Don't ever get involved with us or come to this house again." Their words were harsh, especially considering how much we had supported them. How we dreamed of living quietly with Mom and Dad in our new home. It felt like a dream. As I gathered our belongings and approached the entrance, I shared an important piece of information. "Oh, by the way, it seems there's a misunderstanding about the monthly mortgage payments. It's $1,825 every month, okay? Make sure you understand that," I explained. "What?" they exclaimed in shock, their faces turning pale all at once. "Hold on a second, isn't the loan just $473 a month?" they protested. "You misunderstood, didn't you?" Levi explained. "This house is under our father's name, so the loan is contractually agreed to be paid off through a debit from Dad's account. Zoe and I were planning to live in this house for the rest of our lives, so we told him he wouldn't have to pay. We were bearing all the costs, so I was transferring $473 and Zoe was transferring $1,352 to our father's account every month. It turned out Father had only remembered the monthly transfers into his account. Moreover, Zoe and I split the living expenses equally. Our parents probably never thoroughly checked the costs and assumed it wasn't a significant amount," he concluded. "What? No way. We can't pay $1,825 a month. We can't even cover the living expenses on top of that. How can Zoe afford to contribute so much?" the in-laws exclaimed. "I don't know how you perceive me, but I'm a department head at a major corporation. I earn quite a lot," I interjected. What? They continued to be perplexed. "Zoe earns much more than I do," Levi said, explaining to the in-laws. The in-laws looked shocked. "Well, we've decided to cut ties with you, so it's up to you to support our parents from now on," Levi said firmly. "No way. Zoe, Levi, wait. We were wrong. Let's live peacefully together like before, okay?" the mother-in-law pleaded. "What, Mom and Dad, you were gonna leave us? You guys can repay the loan, can't you? If that's the case, shouldn't you live with those who can?" I argued. "That's not fair. Dad told me the loan was only about $473. That's why we came here. We've already canceled our previous house," the sister-in-law protested. That's not my problem. Isn't this mess because you wanted to move in with us in the first place? Levi said. That's right. Your husband makes very little money, doesn't he? But you've always said that family is more important than money. And when your livelihood is at stake, none of that matters, I added, pointing out their hypocrisy. The quarrel between the in-laws and the sister-in-law was unbearable to watch. Well, we're leaving, I declared. And with that, Levi and I left the house and moved into our rented room. Despite numerous messages from the in-laws, we ignored them all. According to our neighbors, the in-laws and the sister-in-law's family had no choice but to live together. However, they couldn't pay the loan and eventually had to let go of the house. When they sold the house, a considerable debt remained. Even after using the father-in-law's early retirement benefits for repayment, they still fell short. Eventually, they had to settle for a small apartment and work multiple jobs to repay their debt. Apparently, the sister-in-law's husband didn't want the burden to fall on him, so he ran away. If only the in-laws had continued living peacefully with us, they wouldn't have faced these hardships. But again, it's none of our concern now. On the other hand, Levi and I found our rented apartment much cozier than anticipated. We planned to stay here for a while and save money. We lived happily, watching our savings grow at an incredible rate. We believed it was essential to save as much as we could for the future while enjoying occasional luxuries. Our aim was a happy life together in the years to come. I'm at a loss for words as I stand before the meal I've spent hours preparing. Why would my respected brother-in-law's wife be so cruel to me? I thought, perplexed. I'm Aurora, a 27-year-old office worker. My family consists of my husband Chase and our 3-year-old son. Chase is 4 years older than me, and our relationship began as boss and subordinate. We often went out for drinks, got close, and started dating. A year later we got married, bought a house, and planned for the future, enjoying our happy days together. However, our happiness was overshadowed by a problem. Adriel's wife, Delilah. Adriel is Chase's older brother. Chase and his siblings lost their father in an accident when they were young. Their mother, a former housewife, became depressed due to the shock. She eventually regained some strength and returned to work, but only part-time. Adriel, a college student at the time, dropped out to support the family financially. He always said, "I want Chase to go to college properly," and worked hard without complaining. Thanks to Adriel's sacrifices and some scholarships, Chase attended college and now works at his current company. When Chase and I got married, Adriel and their mother expressed their gratitude. At the wedding, Chase tearfully thanked Adriel, saying, "If you weren't my brother, I wouldn't be here today." Adriel has always been kind, cheerful, and thoughtful toward us. However, after we got a house near Adriel's family, Delilah frequently reminded me to be thankful to her husband. Adriel's job keeps him very busy with long business trips and overtime, and during these times, Delilah often came to our house unannounced. Living just 5 minutes away, she would drop by to eat, bathe her children, and leave them with me before heading home. She also made selfish demands like, "I'm not in the mood for Western food today, so please make it Japanese," or, "My child wants a hamburger steak today, so please cook it," she demanded. We with Chase didn't dare to object to her because we were grateful to Adriel. Once, when Chase told her that maybe she was turning too much housework over to me, she replied, "Thanks to Adriel, you went to college and got into a famous company. Because of you, he only graduated from high school and struggles in his current job. If he had graduated from college, he would have had a better career. That's why you got a new house, but we have used house, so you wouldn't pay for it by doing those for us," she accused. When she told this, Chase always gets silent and unable to respond. However, not wanting to mention the service Adriel had rendered to him, Chase turned to me. "Sorry, but thanks to my brother we are here today, so could you please be patient and sort things out with Delilah?" he asked. I reluctantly agreed to his request. As a result of our conversation, Delilah's demands increased. Her annoying behavior boiled down to 2 things. She would come to our house to eat or take a bath. Recently, she decided to use me to show off to her relatives. "We have relatives coming to our house and I want to cook dinner for them and entertain them," Delilah stated. At first I thought she was also going to invite me to socialize with her relatives, But when I finished cooking, she kicked me out saying, "Well, our relatives will be here soon, so you should go home." When I later found out what her relatives had discussed with her, I was surprised. They talked about Delilah cooking everything herself and praised her for being a good cook. This happened more than once or twice. Every time Delilah had relatives over, she would have me cook for them and then send me home. Of course, I picked out the meals, cooked them myself, and paid for the ingredients myself. Delilah never even chopped the ingredients for the meals. Moreover, I was always responsible for preparing gifts for the middle and end of the year, as well as other tokens of appreciation for Adriel's bosses and relatives who helped him. They were always sent by mail on behalf of Delilah. She often gave me instructions when the time came. Adriel's bosses and relatives would praise her at every family gathering as a very attentive and capable wife. "You should learn from her, Aurora," they would say to me. I couldn't count the number of times Delilah said, "I prepare everything myself." Chase and I told Delilah that we didn't mind preparing such gifts, but she should pay for them. In addition to the tasks from the brother-in-law's wife, we had our own people to whom we had to send gifts in the middle and at the end of the year, so it cost much more than necessary. We explained this to Delilah, but she refused to listen. "It's cheaper compared to what Adriel sacrificed, covering your education and living expenses," she told my husband. She also accused me, stating, "Adriel will be surprised to hear that I am considered a good wife for the little things I put into these gifts. It's the same as Chase repaying Adriel for his kindness, right? A wife who doesn't help her husband repay kindness is the worst." Delilah is quarrelsome in this way, and she used Adriel's favor for Chase to give us orders. We were in charge of all seasonal letters and New Year's cards, as well as mid-year and year-end gifts. She liked to say a lot lately. "Chase has become a great man because of Adriel," as if it were a cliché. Furthermore, she said things like, "Rather, you should ask me if you want to avoid misunderstandings." I was mortified as I checked the expenses for every month and every event. Then the decisive event occurred. Delilah asked her to prepare a meal for a dinner party for about 20 of their relatives at her house during the summer event. For summer and New Year's, their relatives frequently gathered at someone's home, usually at the home of a more senior relative. Delilah, on the other hand, said, "Please come to our house." Her relatives were overjoyed because they knew she was a great cook and a thoughtful woman. However, she expected me to do all of the preparation. Chase had other commitments on that day, so I couldn't ask him to help. When I asked how she planned to pay for it, Delilah said we'd have to do it themselves. Preparing food and drinks for 20 people is a significant drain on our family finances. I told her that we should at least split the bill, but Delilah refused. She said, as usual, "Adriel has been put through a lot of hardship, so he deserves at least that much." When I suggested discussing it with Adriel, Delilah screamed, "I will not forgive you if you do that. Adriel is currently busy with his work. Are you returning kindness with ingratitude?" I was at my limit, but the day of the dinner party was getting closer. I looked at Delilah, who didn't seem to be in a hurry or preparing in any way. I had no choice but to begin planning for the event several days in advance. In addition to that, I did some behind-the-scenes preparation. The day of the dinner came. I began preparations early in the morning and finished them a few hours before the meeting time, despite being exhausted. Delilah came to check on me after all of the preparations were completed. "Delilah, all preparations have been completed, and I believe they can come at any time now," I told her. Looking at the dishes on the table, Delilah exclaimed, "What are you doing? The food should be eel rice, shouldn't it?" "But you didn't tell me to prepare eel rice," I replied. "You should know that. It's so embarrassing. Our relatives are gathering for the summer festival, and they believe I can't even prepare eel rice. Please place your order for the eel rice right away," she demanded. No, I've already prepared enough food for everyone, and the fish I purchased is fresh, so I haven't prepared such an embarrassing dish," I replied. "It has to be eel rice," Delilah insisted. She refused to listen to me. She also insisted that we order a special for everyone with our own money. When I asked her to pay for it, she said she'd never do it. I couldn't take it anymore and once again protested her behavior. "I can't believe this," I said. "Whenever you invite your relatives over, you make me cook for them. You come to our house every day when Adriel is not there. We prepare all the gifts, including mid-year and year-end gifts." I resented. Adriel has done so much for you. You should be grateful, she stated. Delilah, you even had an affair with someone you met on a dating app or something, didn't you? I confronted her and continued. You are a housewife, but you leave a lot of things to me, so I was curious about what you were doing, so I looked into it. Oh, so you knew about it, Delilah replied with a laugh. But I'm afraid you don't have any proof. It doesn't matter. You're doing me a favor by cooperating with me, so it's like you're returning the favor. At this point, I was silent and removed food in silence. I'm leaving. I will never return, I said, as I packed my belongings and left. Delilah was yelling something about ordering eel rice from behind me, but I ignored her and left. Some hours later, she called me repeatedly. When I was forced to respond, she exclaimed, "What the hell is going on?" She sounded panicked. Is there something wrong? I asked deliberately. I have so many inquiries, she began. I cleaned up the dishes you prepared and ordered eel rice because I had no choice and paid for it with my own money, but none of my relatives came. It appears that they know everything we were discussing earlier. She continued to fuss a lot. I couldn't stop laughing. I was also surprised that she took away the food I prepared. The reality is as follows. I couldn't take Delilah's arrogance any longer. She was going to judge me, but I thought if I talked to Adriel honestly, he'd give me good advice. I also thought that if he were in his wife's place, he wouldn't say something like, "Did you forget how much you owe me?" When Adriel listened to me, he didn't seem to believe me. Delilah always put on a good face for her relatives, but she also pretended to be the perfect wife for Adriel. When Adriel returned home from work, she made him a hot meal with showing him smile. Despite the fact that this was the food we wanted to eat the next day, she arrogantly dragged it out of our house. She also told Adriel that they frequently invited me to dinner, but she asked Adriel not to tell him to us about it because they didn't want Adriel to be bothered, Delilah explaining to Adriel. She never told him that I was involved in any of the gifts, but always told him with a smile, "It is natural for a wife to do such details to save her husband's face." Adriel was always impressed, saying, "I got a wife who is too good for me." As a result, Adriel was speechless when he listened to my story. Adriel is a good man, so he didn't say I was lying, but thought there must be some misunderstanding between us. So I considered how I could show him proof. "Well, will you allow me to get the evidence?" I requested Adriel's permission. First and foremost, I decided to record the usual conversations when Delilah visited our house. I recorded the conversations in which she was selfish about food and said that we had no right to speak back to her if we considered Adriel's kindness to us. I asked Adriel to listen to the recordings. When he did, he was flabbergasted. She also informed Adriel that she and I intended to work together to prepare a dinner party for her relatives. So I got his permission to record that day, from the point where I was preparing the meal for the relatives to the point where Delilah was ranting about ordering eel rice with my money and admitting the affair. I was connected to Adriel and his relatives via video call. I had informed my family ahead of time that we would connect the video call at this time on this day. This was how Adriel and his relatives learned the truth about Delilah. After I left, relatives called Delilah and said, "I can't believe Aurora prepared all the year-end and mid-year gifts until now, taking advantage of Adriel's kindness and even cheated on him." Delilah was bombarded with allegations. She tried to deal with the situation in her usual manner, but the evidence caused her to stutter. The majority of her relatives told her, "I'm cutting ties with you," and hung up the phone, leaving Delilah stunned. Adriel, who had said he would be a little late for work that day, came home and told Delilah what had happened and asked her what was going on. He later told me, "I am disappointed." When he asked Delilah, "How could you cause trouble for my dear little brother and his wife while I was not there and even had an affair?" She burst into tears. She replied him, "I harassed her because I didn't like the fact that she was young and that your brother, and she had a nicer house than we did. I was having an affair because I was lonely due to you not being home often. After hearing Chase read a thank you letter to you at the wedding, I devised a plan to make them owe you and force them to do what I said. I was furious that she had decided to pursue me for such a reason, but I also felt sorry for Adriel. I worked so hard for Chase, not to make him owe me, but because he is my precious little brother. It was not for the sake of saying, 'I did this for you back then.' I'm overjoyed that he's now working for a good company and developing into a wonderful person. I'm sorry Delilah thinks my salary isn't very good, but that's not Chase's fault. It's my lack of effort, he explained to Delilah. We also found out that she was leaving her children at home while she went out with her lover. Adriel intended to divorce and give her alimony and custody. Delilah was up in arms, claiming that she did not want a divorce. She agreed to a slight reduction in alimony in exchange for her properly divorcing and giving him custody. The affair was found out about by her lover's wife, who also demanded full alimony. Delilah returned to her parents' house and worked several part-time and day jobs in order to pay the double alimony and child support. She was looking disheveled when he met me a few months later for a visit to see his child. Adriel later apologized to us and paid for the ingredients and alcohol on the day of the dinner party. He also promised to pay for the meals Delilah had eaten at our house and the gifts she had made us prepare for her. But Chase and I talked about it and told Adriel that we were done with that money. I apologized to Adriel because while this incident was intended to avenge Delilah, it also brought shame to his family. I don't think Delilah would feel remorse if I did something like that, Adriel laughed. If anything, I am an unfit husband for not noticing Delilah's behavior until now, he said, looking sad. Currently, Adriel has kept his job and is caring for the baby. We keep in touch with Adriel, and on days when he is unable to make it, we care for his child at our home or invite him over for dinner. Chase and I don't hang out with Delilah. If I didn't have to hear phrases like, "Do you have gratitude to Adriel?" we could get along and have a better relationship. We learned a lesson that there are people who make you feel a lot, even though it is not a favor you gave. Chase and I laugh. My name is Jenna. I'm 30 years old. I work from home as an illustrator and a webcomic artist. My son Ezra is just 5 years old. He's a lively boy who goes to preschool. My husband Emilio has a busy job, so he rarely gets home early, leaving most of the housework and childcare to me. Despite the challenges of balancing work and childcare at home, I have always found joy in it. Ezra is adorable, and Emilio does most of the housework and childcare on his days off. I was truly happy for my family and felt satisfied every day. However, my happiness was abruptly shattered one day. It was when Emilio's father, my father-in-law, suddenly passed away. He was only 60 years old, though it seemed too early for him to pass away. He suddenly collapsed and died. Emilio, who lost his father without any warning, was deeply depressed, and it was heartbreaking to see my mother-in-law sobbing at the funeral. During Emilio's bereavement leave, my mother-in-law stayed with us. I accepted it, thinking she must be lonely, but I was wrong. After his bereavement leave, Emilio went back to his regular work routine. My mother-in-law, who hadn't liked me since we got married, always treated me differently, even to the point of excluding me when serving coffee or making fun of the fact that I was raised by a single parent when Emilio wasn't around. I thought once Emilio started working again, she would return to her own home, but she didn't. She continued to stay in our home, bringing in her belongings in large suitcases. A few days later, I asked, "Are you planning to live here, mother-in-law?" She replied, "What a cold-hearted daughter-in-law you are. I'm lonely because my husband suddenly died. You're suggesting that I live alone at home? That's ridiculous." I was shocked by her arrogant attitude and couldn't say anything in return. It's true that my mother-in-law feels lonely, and since she is Emilio's beloved mother, I couldn't bring myself to ask her to leave. She kept bringing more and more of her belongings, eventually establishing her own nest in our living room. I work from home, so I ended up spending more time with my unemployed mother-in-law than anyone else in the family. Those days were nothing but torture. "You're always at home doodling away while Emilio is out there working hard. I feel sorry for Ezra. He's been put in daycare from such a young age just for your hobby," she chided me and added, "When I was young, I took care of Emilio while doing housework." My mother-in-law, who had never worked after getting married at a young age, had always been against the idea of daycare. She regarded my work as a mere hobby and started making a fuss about how pitiful Ezra was for being put in daycare. In addition, after my mother-in-law started living with us, my household chores increased significantly. She would say things like, "You won't even serve lunch to your hungry mother-in-law? What a mean daughter-in-law you are." I had to start preparing lunch. Despite never doing any cleaning herself, she constantly complained, "If we live in such a dirty environment, both Emilio and Ezra will get sick. She kept nagging me to clean every nook and cranny while I was working, which took up more of my time. No matter how much housework piles up, work deadlines do not wait. If I was working late into the night, my mother-in-law would say, "Poor Ezra, he doesn't even have his mom to play with him," while she simply watched TV. I've often thought about discussing the issues with Emilio, but in his presence, my mother-in-law adopts a kind and gentle demeanor. Besides, Emilio is currently immersed in a significant work project. Not wanting him to feel stressed at home as well, I decided to endure the situation. With my passivity contributing to the problem, my mother-in-law grew increasingly overbearing. She refused to eat the lunches I prepared, complaining, "This is awful. You're trying to kill me with this overly seasoned food." She even started demanding money for dining out, often asking for more than $250. I questioned whether she really needed that much, even just for dining out. However, she angrily retorted, "Are you telling me not to have fun? I want to go to the casino. Are you saying a poor widow like me shouldn't enjoy the casino? You're the worst daughter-in-law ever." Left with no other choice, I reluctantly gave her the money. Her demands for housework and money escalated day by day. Between work, housekeeping, parenting, and being my mother-in-law's punching bag, I felt at my wit's end. One day, on our way home from daycare, Ezra asked me a heart-rending question. "Mom, am I a poor child?" I froze for a moment. "What? Why would you think that?" I asked, alarmed. "Grandma said so. She said you're always having fun and that you probably don't like me," my son continued. Tears welled up in Ezra's eyes as he spoke those words. It was at that moment that I realized my mistakes. The feeling was akin to a hard awakening, and I decided I couldn't go on living like this. I was wrong to believe that I alone should bear this burden. My mother-in-law had gone so far as to convince Ezra that children who attend daycare are pitiful, and that his mom is always just having fun drawing. I decided to put an end to this lifestyle. A few days later, I announced to my mother-in-law, who was sprawled out in the living room watching TV as usual, "Mother-in-law, Ezra and I are going on a week-long overseas trip." "An overseas trip?" She jolted upright, eyes sparkling at me. "That sounds fantastic. When are we leaving? I better start packing," she fussed. "There's no need for you to pack, mother-in-law. As I said, only Ezra and I are going," I firmly stated. "You won't take me along, leaving Emilio behind as well? It's unbelievable," she exclaimed. "Indeed, both you and Emilio are staying behind. Thank you for understanding," I finished. While my mother-in-law continued to grumble, I remained firm in my decision to end my life with her. A few days later, as planned, Ezra and I departed for our overseas trip. Ezra was thrilled to be on a plane for the first time. With my hectic routine balancing work and household tasks, I hadn't found the time to pamper Ezra. I decided to use this moment to treat him lavishly. In the midst of our enjoyable overseas trip, I received a call from my mother-in-law. It was unpleasant, ruining the joyful mood, but I answered anyway. With a malicious tone, she said, "Sorry to bother your vacation, but Emilio and I have moved out. There's no home for you freeloaders now. You have no place to return, so stay overseas as long as you'd like," she stated. "Is that so? Thank you for letting us know," I replied. She seemed surprised by my indifferent response, but I wasn't surprised at all. Rather, I was thankful to her for letting me know. Everything was going according to plan. After our enjoyable days overseas, when I returned home to our new house, Emilio was waiting for us with a smile. "Welcome back. Did you and Ezra enjoy your overseas trip, Jenna?" he asked thoughtfully. "Yes, we had a great time. Thank you for the wonderful trip, Emilio," I said. "Well, it's the least I could do after all the trouble," he added. Suddenly, as we were chatting happily, my cell phone rang. It was a call from my mother-in-law. With a sense of excitement, I answered the call. "Yes, what can I do for you, mother-in-law?" "Do you know where Emilio has gone?" she asked fiercely. She started to explain the situation without giving me a chance to respond. She had started living in the house she had found with Emilio. However, Emilio had not returned home even once. Worried, she had called Emilio's office only to be informed that Emilio had quit a few days earlier. This drove her into a panic. Even when she tried to call Emilio, she couldn't reach him. She was about to report him missing to the police, but just to be sure, the police called Emilio. To her dismay, they managed to reach him. Not only that, but when they offered to relay a call to her, Emilio declined. This led to her causing a scene at the police station, earning herself a stern warning and red-faced embarrassment. "You've done something to Emilio, haven't you? Where is he?" she demanded. "Emilio is here at home. He's playing happily with Ezra, so there's no need to worry." I tried to calm her down. "What are you saying? Emilio was supposed to live with me. I was going to make him divorce you and take custody of Ezra," she explained. "That was something you unilaterally told Emilio, wasn't it?" she added. My mother-in-law was furious. However, I had discussed the situation with Emilio before our overseas trip. I told him about the issues I was facing living with his mother and the negative effects it was having on Ezra. Emilio apologized, saying he felt terrible about his mother's behavior. I realized for the first time during our conversation that Emilio had also been struggling, living with his mother. Each time they were alone, she would badmouth me, saying things like, "Jenna is constantly verbally abusive. She won't even let me eat, and you should divorce that woman as soon as possible." He was fed up with her baseless complaints. Although Emilio believed in me and countered his mother's accusations, his objections only resulted in her screaming at him, leaving him feeling confused and unsure of what to do. So we executed a plan to isolate my mother-in-law. The plan was Emilio's idea. He gifted Ezra and me the overseas trip and even rented a new house for us. When we returned from the trip, our things would be waiting in our new home, since our old house was set to be vacated. Emilio suggested to his mother that they should find a new house. Misunderstanding his intentions, she happily believed that Emilio intended to divorce me and live with her in the new home. In her rush to ensure that I had no place to return to, she quickly settled on a house and completed the move. Emilio, without informing his mother, had our families and Ezra's belongings moved to our new home, while his mother's belongings were sent to her new place. Emilio had avoided any contact with his mother, which is why she couldn't reach him. When she called his office, she was told that he had quit because, coincidentally, Emilio was headhunted by a better company and decided to change jobs. In other words, during the week when Ezra and I were traveling abroad, Emilio, Ezra, and I had moved into a house where we three would live together. At the same time, my mother-in-law had moved into a house where she would live alone. I imagine it was hard for you, mother-in-law, to see the face of an incompetent daughter-in-law every day. Emilio and I thought it would be wise for both of us to avoid seeing each other from now on, and so we decided to handle it this way, I said. "You are such a terrible daughter-in-law," she resented. When I explained the situation, my mother-in-law yelled at me over the phone. Emilio, sighing at his mother's loud voice coming from the phone, walked over to me and discreetly picked up the phone, but she continued to insult me without noticing it. "All you do is draw doodles like a child and don't work. Emilio doesn't need a wife like you. He must have found you annoying. It would have been better if Ezra wasn't born as your son. Ezra and Emilio are both really unhappy," she said angrily. "Mom, so you always used to shout at Jenna like that, huh?" When Emilio said in a quiet voice, his mother's angry voice abruptly stopped and he continued, "Mom, I love Jenna and I have no intention of divorcing her. I know you must feel lonely since Dad passed away suddenly, but it's not right to bully Jenna. I regret behaving in a way that deceived you, but it was the only way, given that you refused to listen to anything we say," he concluded. "You're being deceived, Emilio," my mother-in-law exclaimed. "I'm not being deceived. Jenna is the best wife for me and the best mother for Ezra. I'm sorry, but I want to keep my distance from you. I can't care for a mother who says terrible things about important people," he uttered firmly. "Emilio, wait, please." She wouldn't calm down. Emilio, ignoring his mother's crying voice, ended the call. "I'm sorry for making you suffer until now. The current job doesn't require much overtime, so I can do more housework and childcare than before. Let's live happily from now on, just the three of us," Emilio said to me. "Yes, thank you, Emilio," I responded. Thus our family decided to cut ties with the mother-in-law. Later, I heard from a relative that my mother-in-law had been living for a while by dipping into her husband's inheritance. However, she couldn't stop going to the casino and, for the first time in her life, had to work with no work experience. My mother-in-law, now 55 years old, has been swept up in the waves of public life, which has led to hard times. When Emilio found out about his mother's situation, He felt sorry for her and reached out once. However, my proud mother-in-law dismissed his help, saying, "You're no longer my son. You've been tainted by that devilish daughter-in-law." Emilio was stunned by his mother's behavior, and with a look of deep disappointment, stated that he would sever all ties with her. As for me, I turned the days of harassment by my mother-in-law into a comic essay, and it became a huge hit. I got a call from a publisher, and I was able to publish the comic essay book I've always wanted. I guess I should be grateful to my mother-in-law, who gave me all kinds of trouble during the hellish days after she came into our house. I didn't know what to do, but I fell in love with Emilio again for saving me from those days. Now I am serializing a comic essay depicting my warm family life on the web, and it is also popular. I look forward to continuing to spend happy days just like this with Emilio and Ezra.